you have to bring them into the game as soon as possible. And the easy example of this is you can send a meeting that says catch up, but if you're sending that to an employee or maybe someone else's employee or someone that you work with, you can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for that person. Hello, and welcome to Enter the Nebula, episode 35. My name's Mike Urko, and this week we're talking about playing cards and how good of a card player you are. But as I'm sure you're guessing, we're not talking about playing cards. We're talking about conversations, and we're talking about communication. Building off what I talked about a couple weeks ago in episode 33, building relationships through finding value. Well, you usually do that through conversations and experiences. And the way I look at conversations is breaking them into 4 different kind of games or situations. The first is when you're playing a game and the conversation as a game, if you will, is easy. And it's because all your cards are on the table. I liken it to when I was a kid and I would play Go Fish with my grandmother, and we would all just have our cards down. You're not really playing Go Fish because you know what the other person has. Those conversations are easy. It makes finding a mutual outcome easier. It makes knowing what they're feeling easier. It makes sharing how you're feeling easier. But those conversations don't necessarily come naturally, and they're usually built by established trust over time. So it's something that is cool when it happens, but not the norm. The norm usually falls into the other 3 categories, which is when you know the game that you want to play, but maybe the other person doesn't. And the second is if the other person knows the game they want to play, but you don't. And then finally, when you're both playing a game, but it may be a different game, maybe the same game, but there's a lot of unknowns. Let's unpack this for a second. The first one, and I think probably the easiest one to handle, is when you know the game you want to play and the other person maybe doesn't. It's easy in this case to take advantage of somebody. And that is where, if you're looking to build value and establish trust, you have to bring them into the game as soon as possible. And the easy example of this is you can send a meeting that says catch up, but if you're sending that to an employee or maybe someone else's employee or someone that you work with, you can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for that person. I know I've been in that boat, especially if the meeting isn't for a few days. Your mind can wander to all sorts of different areas that just aren't the case. Maybe they just want to catch up on a previous conversation or just say, hi, how are you doing? But your mind can go crazy. So by sharing the purpose and potentially an agenda or desired outcome with whoever you're talking to, whether it's in a formal calendar meeting at work or even just, saying that you want to talk to your spouse, by stating those things, you're bringing the person into the game and you're preparing them for the conversation. And to me, that's very important. If you don't do that, you may get the desired outcome you're looking for. You may be able to pull one off on someone, but they're going to remember that. Eventually, they're going to get wise to your game. And then you're going to end up playing a different game where you have someone who's potentially defensive, closed off, or has a very negative perception of you. So it's good to bring people in and be transparent, because then you're moving towards that conversation where all the cards are on the table, which becomes so much easier. If you find yourself in a position where you're not necessarily clued into the game, it's important to ask questions. Get yourself wise to what the other person is doing. And if they're not willing to share any of their cards and they're purposely keeping you out of the game, it's easiest to walk away. But that's not always the best thing. So What I've found, which is incredibly hard to do, and you have to do it with tact, is call it out. "Hey, I'm not quite sure what we're talking about," or "I'm a little bit confused. Why am I here? What are we looking to achieve?" Those types of comments or questions aren't as aggressive, but they do state very clearly that you're not comfortable with not understanding why you're here. And I think stating those things in those conversations can make it easier to bring you in. And it makes the person who may be trying to hold all the cards know that you're not going to stand for that. And that's important. Finally, when you're talking to someone and you both understand that you're in a game, whether it's maybe you're in a sales conversation with a potential client, or you're trying, it's as simple as maybe trying to decide what you and your spouse want to go do for dinner, or something like that. I found that the more you can slowly, not putting them all on the table at once, but show your cards first, or a few cards, you're going to help the other person open up and be willing to show some cards too. Again, the point here is you don't want to show all your cards, because then you could potentially be taken advantage of. And that's something that I can struggle with at times. Sometimes I tend to be too transparent. It's good to keep some cards close to your vest, especially if you're working or talking to someone where you don't necessarily know what their intentions are. But the more you can kind of show a few at a time, more often than not, people will open up and you can get on the same page and get towards that shared outcome that more often than not you're both looking for. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I think it's something cool to think about. And if you're intentional throughout your conversations, can be a powerful tool to have both inside and outside the workplace. My name is Mike Ergo. You can read the full article on my website, intellectualnebula.com. I hope you continue to like, subscribe, comment on all my socials as it continues to help me grow my brand. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.